Our own capital was guarded by two young National Guard troops who never returned home. They weren't sent abroad. They were not in a combat zone. As they were carrying out their promise to patrol the streets of Washington, a guy came around a corner and started shooting. Two families were split apart in an instant. Two uniforms landed on the sidewalk, and the same question paused in the minds of millions of Americans. How did this occur in this place? However, what really astounded everyone was what happened next. Nation? Because detectives were able to determine that the gunman wasn't just another criminal in a matter of hours. He was an Afghan native, whose asylum was granted earlier this year after entering the U.S. during the chaotic evacuation in 2021. President Donald Trump's response to that shocking news was one of the strongest and most unyielding remarks we've heard in years. He called the incident an act of terror, demanded a thorough investigation of every Afghan brought in under the Biden administration, and announced swift safeguards for the capital. Our narrative starts here, with two Americans who paid the ultimate price and a country that was abruptly forced to face an issue it had thought would never be asked again. Was an American tragedy caused by a flaw in our screening system? Let's examine what transpired, what Trump said, and what this event implies for American security and the future. Imagine this. It's just another day in Washington. A pair of the West Virginia National Association. As part of their responsibility to safeguard the nation's capital, guards are on patrol. They're protecting America from all threats, both foreign and domestic, just as they agreed to do. Then, suddenly a guy round a corner and starts shooting. Both guards are hit, suffering severe injuries. The assault was savage, quick, and based on early reports, planned. This was not an escalating altercation, nor an isolated incident of violence. This was a planned attack on two people, an ambush. Americans who have devoted their lives to their nation's service. Responding troops shot the assailant and arrested him. He made it out alive. He isn't assisting the authorities. However, investigators acted swiftly, and the revelations they made rocked the federal government as a whole. This is when I need your whole focus. It wasn't just any suspect. He wasn't a criminal with a lengthy criminal history or a citizen who had slipped between the gaps of mental health care. He was a person from Afghanistan who lived abroad, and he was a lawful visitor to the United States. Give it some time to sink in. Legally speaking, he got there in September 2021 on one of those evacuation flights that were all the rage after Afghanistan collapsed. Do you recall the chaotic events in Kabul at the airport? There were thousands of people racing the tarmac, overcrowded planes taking off, a sense of despair and haste, and the belief that America had a moral duty to free its allies and partners before the nation utterly broke under the strain of the circumstance. Tens of thousands of people were brought in under the aegis of Operation Allies Welcome. It was presented as a rescue effort for those who had aided American forces throughout the 2 decades of fighting, a humanitarian expedition, support personnel, interpreters, and those who put their lives in danger to serve with our soldiers. However, this is the topic that is currently at the forefront and that no one wanted to ask at the moment. How many of those were individuals genuinely screened? How many people had one-on-one interviews? How many had their criminal histories, terrorist databases, or any other relevant criteria checked? The evidence that is currently available indicates that this specific person was given refuge earlier this year. Under legislation enacted during the previous government, his temporary status was renewed. He wasn't here for a short time then. He was protected by the law. After reviewing his case, the system stated he then allegedly ambushed 2 National Guard soldiers in broad daylight after saying, "Yes, you can stay." In a video statement issued hours after the attack, President Trump responded to the question that most Americans have on their minds. How does this happen? How does someone who entered the country under a program designed to protect allies end up attacking the very people sworn to defend that country? And believe me, it was among the strongest. Uncensored answers from every president in office in recent history. He didn't hold back. The message was not softened by him. He referred to it as an act of evil, hatred, and dread, which is precisely what he thought it was. He characterized the assailant as an animal that would incur the highest potential cost. He offered thoughts and assistance to the families of the injured guardsmen in a direct address. However, he suddenly changed course, and it is now hard to overlook the policy ramifications. He stated that according to the best information available, the suspect is a foreign national who came to our nation from Afghanistan, which he vividly recounted. He continued by saying that the person was carried in during those notorious flights during the previous regime when, in his words, no one knew who was arriving or anything about it. Then came the comment that now dominates every political discussion, every news cycle, and every dinner table debate in America. He remarked, "This assault highlights the single, The former government allowed tens of millions of unidentified and unscreened foreigners from all over the world, from areas most people don't even want to consider, which is the biggest national security issue confronting our country. The point he's making is obvious, regardless of your opinion of that description. According to him, there is a clear connection between cases like this one and inadequate vetting procedures and lax immigration enforcement. And he's not the only one who thinks that. Millions of Americans are nodding their heads, especially those in the elderly population who place a high importance on stability, law and order, and national security. To be honest, it raises serious concerns about judgment, procedure, and priorities when you hear that someone who should be saved and thankful for the chance America provided them turns around and assaults American service people. Trump went beyond. He wasn't only critical, he said that action will be taken. He stated all of the people who came from Afghanistan during the previous government will now be re-examined. Every case, file, background check, and any evidence that someone doesn't belong here, doesn't contribute to the nation, or is unable to show that they love America will be eliminated. He presented it as duty rather than cruelty. We don't want them if they can't love our nation. That seems like plain sense to some people. Others may perceive it as xenophobia. Regardless of your position on that spectrum, there is a genuine and rapid change in policy. It didn't end there either. Trump declared in the same speech that he was bringing in 500 more troops to guard the Capitol. It's a real deployment, not just a symbolic gesture, greater security presence, more soldiers on the ground, and more obvious assurances to the American people that their government is taking threats seriously. According to him, America will never back down or give up. Of terror, that safety, order, and sovereignty would be restored, and that the mission these military personnel were carrying out would not be hindered. And he stated unequivocally that the offender would receive prompt and definite retribution, almost as a footnote, if the bullets traveling in the other direction hadn't already done so. That's the type of phrase that sparks conversation. It's straightforward, it's uncooked, it's not polished, and it strikes a chord with many Americans. However, while Trump was saying that, meanwhile, a new story was emerging in the press. This is where things become difficult since the tale you get depends on whose station you're watching. Some media outlets concentrated on the actual disaster. Others, especially on networks like MSNBC, took a completely opposite tack, focusing on the military community's camaraderie, the bravery of first responders, and the prayers for the injured Guardsmen. They questioned the whole reason for the National Guard's presence in Washington. According to them, Trump's the conditions for this attack were established by the deployment of troops for his administration's criminal campaign. They questioned whether the presence of military men was actually making the city less safe rather than safer, and if they were being used as political props. Trump's social media post about the Honduran elections was even seen by one analyst, who implied that the president was unfocused, preoccupied, or unconcerned with the current situation. It was obvious how it was framed. Trump is careless, his policies are risky, and thus, he is somewhat to blame for the attack. Isn't that absurd? Here's what that story overlooks, though, and this is significant. Stay with me, then. Because the Guardsmen were positioned on a street corner, the suspect refrained from attacking them. He apparently planned to carry out a violent act against U.S. government officials, which is why he assaulted them. The threat was not created by the military. The inability to thoroughly screen the person who turned into a threat, that's what made the threat. And Trump continues to emphasize that point. Where the troops should be stationed is not at issue. The question is whether we are aware of who we are, first allowing to enter the nation. This is where the rubber meets the road, so let's speak about vetting. This is where reality, policy, and procedure intersect in ways that most people are unaware of until something goes horribly wrong. During the pullout from Afghanistan, the U.S. withdrew between 70 and 100,000 individuals in only a few weeks. Among the fastest and biggest humanitarian airlifts in contemporary history was this one. And there was complete anarchy. People were hurrying on airplanes. People without proper papers were reportedly waved past checks. Some refugees were said to have no confirmed ties to U.S. soldiers or operations. Later, ground commanders claimed that there was insufficient time and funding to perform in-depth, one-on-one interviews with each. Someone who got aboard a plane. Speed was the top priority. Become folks, evacuate before things become worse. Later, worry about the specifics. However, the specifics are important, and later is now. During his first term, Trump's government implemented a procedure known as the Special Immigrant Visa Process. It was created especially for citizens of Afghanistan and Iraq who had served in the U.S. military. Comprehensive background checks, biometric information, interviews, American staff references, and a multi-year vetting schedule. It moved slowly. Though comprehensive, it was bureaucratic. That procedure was circumvented when the evacuation took place during the subsequent administration. Humanitarian parole, a transitory status that permits admission without the same amount of inspection, was used instead. It was thought that once individuals were safe, screening could take place after arrival. However, did it? Congress attempted to provide an answer to that question. Committees of oversight asked for information. How many people entered? Now, where are they? Have they been completely vetted? What mechanisms are in place to keep an eye on them? According to testimony that has been made public, officials were unable to give definitive answers. They were proud of Operation Ally's greeting, according to one officer. Another acknowledged that they lacked precise figures. According to a military officer, the first intake did not involve case-by-case interviews. Here we are then. Under emergency circumstances, tens of thousands of immigrants were permitted to the U.S., some people who are deserving of shelter. There may have been those who fell between the gaps, but there were also some who truly put their lives at danger for America. Some of them apparently just attacked 2 National Guard men, while others had their backgrounds never confirmed or their motivations never questioned. Now, if you're an American viewing this, you may be reflecting on your own life, the society you were raised in, the principles you were taught, such as independence, accountability, and the conviction that America was a place of order rather than chaos, where protecting the populace was the government's first priority. What I want you to know is this. Even if this time is difficult and perplexing, it is also a chance to demand better, demand responsibility, and insist that security and compassion are not mutually contradictory. Because there is more than one incidence involved in what we are now seeing. It has to do with a pattern, years of choices that put politics ahead of procedure, speed ahead of safety, and optics rather than results. And there are actual repercussions. Think about the statistics on violence against police officers that have been making the rounds. The National Fraternal Order of Police reports that almost 300 cops were shot while performing their duties in the months before this event. There were over 60 ambush-style attacks, of which nearly 20 were deadly, and nearly 40 of them were slain. These aren't only figures. These individuals, who wear uniforms every day, include dads, moms, sons, and daughters, trusting in the mission while being aware of the hazards. You begin to notice a troubling pattern when you combine that with the fact that assaults against ICE agents have more than doubled in a single year, going from fewer than 20 documented assaults to well over 200. Directly or indirectly, people are being informed that immigration enforcement is harsh, that law enforcement is the enemy, and that border protection is racist. Additionally, when you've repeated that message loudly, often, and via enough channels, some people begin to think that it's okay to use violence against such cops. In a video that went viral following the incident, a lady expressed her disbelief that 2 National Guard officers were shot. She hinted that the violence was a normal reaction to Trump's ideas when she said, "When you declare war on people based on racism and hate, what do you expect? Give it some time to sink in." According to her, implementing immigration laws is the same as declaring war and assaulting. It makes sense that American service personnel would behave this way. Political disagreement is not what that is. Radicalization is that. And Trump and his followers claim that this type of speech is fostering a dangerous atmosphere where individuals feel free to assault anyone connected to security or law enforcement. On the opposite end of the political spectrum, there are MPs who were previously being investigated for inciting military personnel to defy orders, several members of the Democratic Congress. Before this attack, members, including some veterans of the armed forces, released a video in which they urged service personnel to defy what they saw as unlawful instructions from the president. High-ranking former military officers appeared in the video. It seemed reasonable on the surface and was polished and professional. The military does, after all, educate you to never obey an unlawful command. This fundamental idea dates back to the Nuremberg trials during World War II. Obeying orders is not a defense if those directives are illegal. Here's the issue, though. What commands were unlawful was not made clear in the video. It just meant that soldiers should be prepared to decline if Trump were to issue them. Without offering any specific examples, it cast doubt on legitimate orders. Additionally, the Justice Department has launched an inquiry into whether the video is an attempt to subvert military discipline or sedition in the wake of the attack. They have contacted the relevant politicians and asked for volunteer interviews. On CNN, one of them, a former Navy commander who is currently a member of Congress, said he would decline to participate in a voluntary interview. He referred to it as political persecution. He said that he was only reminding soldiers of their constitutional duties, but he is also using the incident to raise money by sending out bulk SMS and soliciting donations from followers so that he can defend himself against future threats. On the one hand, the president claims that Americans were not adequately protected by the system. Alternatively, you have lawmakers claim that the president poses a threat. The uniformed men and women, who only wish to carry out their duties without being transformed into political porn, are stuck in the midst. It's disorganized, it causes division, and it's precisely the type of circumstance that leaves regular Americans feeling worn out and perplexed. But this is what I want you to comprehend. There is a legitimate policy issue that merits attention behind all the noise, party talking points, and screaming matches on television TV. A severe response. How can we strike a balance between citizen security and compassion for refugees? This is not an either-or situation. Being alert and humane at the same time is doable, but it takes something we haven't had much of lately: proficiency. Having procedures in place to thoroughly screen individuals before they enter the nation is a sign of competence. When lives are on the line, it means not taking shortcuts. It entails admitting that certain nations, especially those without operational governments or dependable record-keeping, provide particular difficulties that call for more examination. Afghanistan is among such locations. It has been an area of active fighting for more than 20 years. Its government fell. Its institutions hardly exist at all. You're taking a chance when you hire someone from such setting, since there are no centralized databases to check their past against, no trustworthy method to confirm their employment history, and no personal references. However, that does not imply that everyone from Afghanistan poses a risk. However, it does imply that a one-size-fits-all emergency evacuation strategy with no thorough follow-up leads to gaps. Additionally, gaps increase danger. Furthermore, unmanaged danger has the potential to become tragedy. Demonizing a whole community is not the goal of Trump's order to re-examine each Afghan applicant. Closing those disparities is the goal. It's about stating, we need to look back on the decisions we made during a crisis with clarity and make sure we didn't miss anything, something that may put American lives in danger. Your overall perspective on immigration and governmental duty will likely determine whether you find that to be reasonable or reactionary. But let's take a moment to step back because, while it's important, this episode is only one aspect of a much broader discussion about the sort of nation America aspires to be in the future. Trump has stated unequivocally that security is the top priority for his government, social security as well as military security. The belief that citizens should be able to go about their daily lives, send their children to school, go to work, and have faith that their government has taken appropriate safety measures. Stronger borders result from this. It entails more thorough screening. It entails deporting those who broke the terms of their stay or entered the country illegally. It also entails not saying sorry for prioritizing American citizens. His detractors contend that this strategy is cruel, disregards America's past as an immigrant-heavy country, and makes use of fear is used as an excuse for policies that disproportionately hurt disadvantaged groups. They highlight communities living in terror of ICE raids, families split up at the border, and asylum applicants turned away. They claim that refugees are not the true threat to America. It comes from political leaders who take advantage of people's fears. Both parties back up their claims with proof. There are heartwarming tales on both sides. Additionally, both sides sincerely think they are fighting for the nation's essence. But in the midst of all that, I believe the following is overlooked. The majority of Americans oppose brutality. They also want to avoid pandemonium. They're looking for an effective system, a transparent, efficient, and equitable system. Their goal is to assist those in need without endangering their own families. Additionally, they are looking for leaders who can strike that balance without using virtue signaling or demonization. We don't have it at the moment. Our current political climate is one in which every problem is made into a weapon, subtlety is interpreted as weakness, and the most considerate voices are drowned out by the loudest ones. What does this point in time portend for the future, then? What long-term effects may what we're witnessing unfold in real time have? First, anticipate major adjustments to the policy on asylum and refugees. Trump has already hinted at significant restrictions on humanitarian parole. It is anticipated that the special immigrant visa procedure will be improved and reinstated. There will be more thorough background checks awaiting. There will be lengthier intervals. There will be a clear message. You are invited to come to America, but there will be no quick cuts, and you will be subject to a rigorous screening process. Second, anticipate a countrywide review of those currently in the country under emergency or temporary status. Tens of thousands of cases will be reopened as a result. The already overburdened immigration courts will be further overburdened. A few will be exempted and let to remain. Removal procedures will be used to others. It will be a lengthy, difficult, and emotionally taxing procedure. Third, anticipate that this will be a major topic in all next elections. Although immigration has always been a contentious issue in American politics, this occurrence intensifies it. Candidates will have to respond to predetermined questions. Are you in favor of re-examining refugees from Afghanistan? Do you believe that American cities should be home to the National Guard? Do you think that immigration enforcement is an essential government duty or a kind of oppression? Fourth, unless leaders on both sides can find a way to address the concerns of the other side without discounting them, Americans may expect the split to widen. Because this is the reality. The accusations of being ignorant or disloyal from Trump's fans will not convince you that he is not a dangerous authoritarian. Additionally, if you think the immigration system is flawed and needs to be fixed, you won't be convinced by those who call you a bigot. There is paralysis, rage, and a nation that feels more divided every day as a result of both sides talking over one another. So, in a situation like this, what can you do? First, keep yourself informed, from several sources rather than just one. Read what the opposing viewpoint has to say. Recognize their points of contention. If you want to have fruitful conversations with friends, family, and neighbors, you don't have to agree, but you do need to understand. Second, hold all leaders accountable, not only those with whom you disagree. Hold Trump accountable if he promises to re-examine each Afghan immigrant. Request openness, request data, request outcomes. Additionally, if his detractors claim that his policies are unconstitutional, ask them to identify the laws that are being broken and the appropriate legal remedy. Third, avoid simplifying complicated topics into catchphrases. Immigration is challenging. It's challenging to maintain national security. It's difficult to strike a balance between safety and freedom. Anyone who claims there's a simple, the response is either ignorant or dishonest. Fourth, keep in mind that America has endured more. We have endured social unrest, world wars, economic collapse, and civil war. We have committed serious injustices and made dreadful mistakes. However, we have also changed our direction. We have adjusted. We now know. Even though it is a painful moment, the American story does not end here. It's a different chapter, and how it turns out depends on our ability to locate leaders and people who are prepared to put their nation in a party and political principle. Here's what I want you to remember from the entire tale as we tie everything together. There was a terrible onslaught. While performing their duties, 2 American servicemen suffered critical injuries. Justice is currently pending for the culprit, an Afghan national who entered the nation illegally during an emergency evacuation. In response, President Trump made one of the most forceful remarks in recent presidential history about immigration and national security. He mandated a re-examination of, in the tens of thousands. To defend the capital, he increased the number of troops. He presented the situation as one of either pandemonium or safety. As usual, the media were divided. Some concentrated on the policy shortcomings that permitted the suspect to enter the nation. Others concentrated on whether Trump's statements and actions encouraged violence. This is an indisputable fact. The scope of the Afghanistan pullout put strain on the screening system, which ultimately collapsed. It was unable to capture someone who supposedly went on to carry out a terrorist attack. And there must be a reaction to that failure. History will decide if Trump's answer was the correct one. However, there is no way to do nothing. Though disturbing, this event serves as a reminder that all generations must overcome challenges. The future of the nation must be determined by each generation. Additionally, each generation must stand up for the principles it holds dear. This is my challenge to you then. Avoid checking out. Avoid throwing up your hands and declare that everything is too much. Continue to be involved. Pose inquiries. Cast your ballot. Speak to your grandchildren. Talk about your knowledge. Remind them that defending America is worthwhile. Even when it is difficult, particularly when it is difficult, and even when it is messy. Because this is the one thing I've learned from studying history, starting businesses, and attempting to tackle challenging challenges. Whoever gives up is the one who ensures failure. Those who continue to battle, who never give up. The people who transform the world are those who don't believe that things can get better. Please do me a favor and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment below if this breakdown was useful to you or if it helped you make sense of a complex situation. What are your thoughts on Trump's response? Tell me if you think a comprehensive revamp of the vetting system is necessary. If you were in command, tell me what you would do. Your involvement, your voice, and your experience, all important, is more important than ever, particularly right now. I appreciate you watching. Remain vigilant, educate yourself, and never lose hope that America's greatest days are still to come.